Hello! Welcome back to the Communication Experiment Recap! I'm going to do everything that I can to recap this entire 4-hour experience in about 10 minutes or less. So, here we go. First, it starts with culture. Culture is everything that we do, right? So I want to make sure that we connect what we're learning in the communication experiment, because again, it is an experiment. Everything that we do is an experiment to see what works and what doesn't work. But let's tie it into the bigger picture that everything that we do is culture. So let's use culture as the lens through which we see communication and everything else as well, right? And so there's 4 parts that we broke it down: communication, cooperation, collaboration, and then synergy. So communication is one-to-one. Cooperation is you do your part, I do my part. Collaboration is where we do those parts together. And then synergy is an explosion of magic, where it just works because of all the things that we've put into place, all the relationships that we've built, all the time and effort that we've put into this, and then it just clicks, just like that. So let's break it down. Let's start with communication. There were foundation 4 pieces: rapport, trust, credibility, and clarity. Starting with rapport, the easiest way to build rapport: ask questions. When you ask a crummy question, you get a crummy answer. How are you? Doesn't build any rapport. So how about we start with, what's the best part of your day? Or if you're starting your sales meeting, what was the best part of the sales week, or what was the best sale of the week? Some sort of positive. If you're having a boss talk, new term maybe. You're having a talk with your supervisor or even an employee. Say, what's the highlight of your week? If it's been a month, what's the highlight of your month? Start somewhere positive to build relationships, right? Your goal is to get to a yes. You're getting to the affirmative so you can build upon, right? And of course, when you ask great questions, you of course have to listen. We've got to listen. We tend to hear what we're listening for. So clear your mind of everything that's going on, of all the other meetings that you have, of all the other things happening in your workload, the tasks on your plate, the emails in your inbox, the emails in your outbox. Clear your mind of everything and really focus, being present. Listening is about listening with the intent of listening, not responding, right? And then, of course, from building rapport, we've got to earn trust. And we do that mostly with our body. Our body has to say what our words are saying in the same way. So say what you say with your words, also with your body. Then, of course, with your tone, which is about 38% of how we communicate. And then lastly is 7% is our words. It's so little, so measly, it's like nothing. But your words do mean something. Your words are important, I promise. From trust, we earn credibility. Keep that credibility going. How do you do it? Eliminate useless words. Can't, fail, but, hope, if, try. In fact, if you say those in a sentence, it doesn't sound very good. So replace can't with create. Replace fail with results. Replace but or however with and. Replace hope with expect. Replace if when do. Replace if with when, and then replace try with do. Can't, fail, but, hope, if, try becomes create results and expect when do. It just sounds like a cooler sentence to begin with. It means nothing, but it sounds more empowering. It sounds better. So if we want to come across as strong, assertive communicators, let's change some of the language that we use. Even though it's not that much, we can shift that language and shift the entire feeling that people are getting from how they're hearing us. Lastly, focusing on clarity, we start with all this stuff on the bottom, and then what's important, and then what's most important, then what's really most important. We call it the RMI process. You could do that to break down goals, to really figure out what's important as you start with all your goals, maybe on Post-its. I've done this before with some organizations. You put them on Post-its, and then you take the important ones and you move them to another flip chart. And then you take the most important ones and move those to another flip chart. So in the process, you're leaving some behind. And then you move the ones that are really most important. And if you still have 50, do the process again, right? But the goal is to focus on clarity, figure out what's really most important in our communication and in those relationships. right? Because communication is about those individual relationships. Cooperation is about you do your part, I do my part. So how do we do this? 4 pillars: language, so having a common language, having identity, rules, and understanding conflict. So let's start by agreeing on a common language. We played a fun game called Kids, Chores, Bills. I remember how to say it this time, but Kids, Chores, Bills. Kids, Chores, Bills. Common words we use all the time. We had no points. No points. Nobody could come up with anything that meant the same thing as everybody else. And that was in a group of 4 or 5. Imagine your organization. Maybe you have 30, maybe you have 300, maybe you have 3,000 or 30,000. What do those words mean to people? Take the important words that you're using in your organization and make sure everyone has a very clear-cut understanding of what those mean. In fact, if you could have everyone regurgitate those words in the same way, like robots, that would be ideal. From common language, we've got to develop an identity. Easiest way, simplest way I know how to do that is just ask, how do you want to be talked about? How do you want to be remembered? What are those kind of words? You know, we had the example of the obituary, right? The worst case example. But what are the words? What are the feelings that people get when associated with your business, your service, your product, your team, your organization? That's the identity. Then set some ground rules. What are the ground rules? Well, they could be anything. You could have ground rules for communication, for how you operate, for what people do on a regular basis, for how they check in, for what meetings are supposed to look like, for how to streamline technology. I showed you a little chart of one of the organizations I worked with, and they had 15, 20 ground rules, and of course there are more. There's a lot of other things that go on, but that's what they put into the code. So in some way, shape, or form, have people sign up for a code. Literally sign up. They sign into it and they say, this is how we're going to operate. This is how we're going to treat each other. And of course, understanding that we are going to have conflict. It's supposed to happen. It must happen. But as long as you fight for the team, you fight for a higher purpose, a common purpose, for something better. And as you stop yourself in the fight, in the agreement, in the argument or the disagreement, and the argument, you say, hey, whoa. I'm so glad we have something to talk about. Right, and somehow break the ice, but yeah, fight for something. Fight for something bigger, because you know what? It's so easy to compete. It's easy to argue with anybody. It's much more difficult to collaborate, but that's where the magic happens. That's how we get to synergy. So how do we do all this? How do we understand people's language and the rules that they have and what we have, and building a kind of common identity and conflict understanding? Treat others the way they want to be treated. Understand, ask questions. It comes full circle right back to building rapport. We have to constantly build rapport. You don't do it one time and then walk away. Hey, we have rapport. No, we got to keep doing it. All right, moving on to collaboration. Let's see how fast we're doing this. 4 pillars: values, charter, vision, and strategy. So we've got to start with forging shared values. So by asking the simple question, what's most important to your team? Now, of course, you can ask, and then you can ask everybody else. So you can take them through an exercise. Very simple, no physical labor involved, and just ask, hey, what's most important to your team? That might be a team of people that you work with very intimately in your office. It might be everybody in your office. It might be across different offices. It might be different VPs across different offices, however you'd like to do it. But start somewhere and ask, what's most important to your team? What's most important to your team? What's most important to your team? And ask those people and see if they have the same thing. Again, kids, chores, bills, right? It's kind of similar in that way to figure out, do we have the same values in common? Do we have a shared kind of level of importance of things? And from moving on to what's important to us, then put it down on paper, in a charter, or in a culture, in some way, so that people understand what is important to us, our history, mission, vision, bios, the composition of how we're going to operate and play, standards that we have, the manifesto that says, this is why we do what we do. This is Sparta! Not like that. Don't do that. I didn't even see the movie, but I saw some clips. Not kind of a history buff here, so I don't like history movies or historical movies, even made-up historical movies, just not my thing. But this is Sparta, so moving on. Next is defining a collective vision. I feel like I'm doing a pretty good job remembering these in that order. That's why there's these pillars, so the visual of the pillars and move them from there. How did we define a collective vision? How did we kind of metaphorize this? We did the wave. And I said so many times, you could debrief the heck out of the wave. So maybe you do it. Maybe you do it in your office, or maybe you actually use the examples from the wave and say, hey, this is what we did. And for something that should have only taken 20 seconds to actually do, it took us 5 to 10 minutes to figure out how we're going to do it. And then in debriefing it, we talked about, who actually wanted to do the wave, who didn't want to do the wave, and that's communication. So who's interested in the vision and the values of the organization, who's not, who's just there for the paycheck, and just the span of people, but not making anybody wrong. People are not wrong, they're just different. Different values, different goals, different upbringing, different place that they're from. Right? So as we develop that vision, remember, goals can be smart, but your vision must be what? Fly, fascinated, lucid, and yearning. If you don't have something in your organization that people can attach themselves to, a brand, part of your identity that says, this is what drives us, this is Sparta. I'm sorry. Something that's fascinating, something that's lucid, so clear that they can imagine it, they can see it, they picture it, they hear it, they feel it, and something they yearn for, something they actually can't wait to get to work for. And that's what brings people together. You want synergy? It's got to start with that vision. From the vision, of course, we need to develop a collective, collaborative strategy. How do we move forward from the bigger purpose of why we do what we do, to the vision, to the goals, to the plans, and ultimately to our everyday habits? How will we move towards? That's how you put together that strategy. So what is some way that you're going to create strategic engagement in your team to focus on both the values of what's important and the vision for where you're going? I want to leave you with that really big question. I know we didn't even get to the whole last section, but I promised I'd do a separate video on it. So how will you create strategic engagement in your organization, in your team, with your people, to focus on the values of what's most important and the vision for where you're going? Remember, a team without a shared identity is not a team, so we've got to come together and collaborate. The next video is going to be all on synergy. We're going to focus on the idea of core genius. I'll give you some extra stuff that will support you, and we'll have a lot of fun with it. All right? Thank you so much for joining me in the session, The Communication Experiment, how to change the way your team communicates in one day. And it just takes one idea. Start small. I'll see you soon.